Hello, everybody, and a huge and very warm welcome to this evening's event. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the topic of weaning, which is obviously a really big one, moving your baby from milk onto solids. Now, of course, the word weaning can also mean moving your baby from off the breast or off a bottle, but in this case, it's very much around moving onto solids. Tonight is brought to you in partnership with the Parent Sense app and Babies R Us, the Real Mama Club. And we are just absolutely delighted that you're going to be joining us here tonight. So there's a huge amount of information out there about how to wean our babies. And I'm sure many of you have heard about baby-led weaning. Well, tonight, Kath Megaw is going to be joining us, and Kath is my co-author of Weaning Sense, along with the co-author of Feeding Sense and Allergy Sense. She contributed to Pregnancy Sense, and she's also written a myriad of her own books as well. So, Kath, it's a massive and warm welcome to you tonight. I always say this whenever Kath is speaking with me, that I do consider her to be South Africa, if not the world's authority on early infant feeding. She has a massively inquiring and curious mind. There's not a day that goes by that Kath isn't on to the next thing and the next piece of research. And she's called upon by many large corporate organizations as well as conferences worldwide to share that research, because she just really knows how to integrate the information and deliver it in a way that really makes sense to us all, both professionals and parents. So we're super, super lucky to have Kath here with us tonight. Now, in the book Weaning Sense, when Kath and I wrote it, we were very focused on how are the easy ways to wean babies? What are the questions that you've got? And when we started to look at Collab Weaning, for us, this was one of the things that really, really, kind of tugged a chord in our hearts. And that is that it is possibly the biggest parenting conundrum, that you must nurture your baby every day of her life with a simple goal to facilitate her independence from you. And there'll be moments when you want to hold onto her littleness and to control her world for her. But truly, the art of parenting is scaffolding that emerging little person into independence. It's a dance. And feeding is the one area where you will really feel the weight of it. And so tonight, Kath is going to take us through Collab Weaning. She's going to talk to us about how collaborative we can be with our little one in order to achieve little ones who are, or in order to ensure that our little one is independent in feeding, making the right choices, and a happy and not a picky eater. Before we hand over to Kath to take over, I want to just share a little bit about what you can be winning and what's coming your way. As I mentioned, this event is brought to you by the Parent Sense app. And tomorrow morning, you're going to be getting an email that's going to contain a whole lot of absolutely fabulous little goodies for you. The first thing is that you're going to get 50% off a lifetime subscription to the Parent Sense app. Now, for those of you who haven't experienced the Parent Sense app, the Parent Sense app covers the first year of life, plus a little bit on pregnancy and a little bit on toddlers as well. And we look at sleep, health, and play and development, but very specifically also feeding. So we have meal plans all the way through the first year of life, as well as recipes. Now, tomorrow, you are going to get a 50% discount off a lifetime subscription. So watch your inbox and take advantage. We've also recently released the responsive routine inside the app, which is actually a routine that allows you to input your baby's day, so what time they fed or slept, or what time you want them to wake up in the morning, what time you want them to go to bed in the evening, and it adjusts their whole day for them. So do look out for that, a 50% discount off the lifetime subscription. The second thing you're going to get is 50% off the Confident with Choking course. These courses all sit inside the app, and this particular one is an absolute must-do, particularly if you're going to be wanting to do some baby-led weaning with your little ones. So Get Confident with Choking is a big must-do. And then also, not a discount, but completely free, is Weaning Sense group coaching. So do not miss out on this. It's really, really a big thing. We're giving it away for free for this month, and we'd love for you to join Kath on her Weaning Sense coaching group. And then finally, we're also going to be announcing the winners tomorrow of our lucky draws. They're going to be 2 500 Rand Babies R Us gift vouchers and a lifetime subscription to Parent Sense. So please do watch your inbox tomorrow morning for all of these fabulous things. So here's a little bit about the what you're going to get tomorrow, 25% off Get Confident with Choking. And you can have a look at that. The modules are here below. We're going to look at why choking happens, what can babies choke on, identifying a choking episode, management of choking, and then care of the unresponsive and non-breathing casualties. So please do watch out for that. You will enter the number Collab25 or the voucher code Collab25, and you'll be able to get 25% discount there. And then, as I mentioned, a 50% discount off a lifetime subscription to the app. This is the app. You do not want to miss out on this. And then a massive gift for you, a group coaching course with Kath as you wean your baby. So if any of you have got babies from 4 months to 6 months of age, you do want to do this. So watch out tomorrow and you'll be able to join that. It's going to be valid for the next couple of months. Right, so without further ado, I am going to hand over to Kath Megaw. Kath, I'm super excited to have you here with me today, and I'm really going to be looking forward to hearing everything that you have to say about weaning. So from here, I'm going to hand over to Kath. Kath is going to share her talk. We have recorded her talk, and the reason for that is that there is load shedding tonight for her, but she's going to be on live. So if you just plug your questions in down below in the chat or in the Q&A, Kath will be answering them live. So it's the best way to get the most out of Kath, because she's going to be talking to you as well as answering your questions at the same time. Kath, that is some serious multitasking. So everybody, without further ado, enjoy this evening's presentation on weaning.
Hi, I get to speak to you about one of my favorite topics. I'm absolutely passionate about the introduction to solids, and I'm passionate about it because I really want to help parents and little ones be set up for a lifelong journey of food and enjoyment around food. So I'm hoping today that I'm going to just give you a few tips on how you can actually get your little one to enjoy the food that they are eating. So often the biggest challenge is that the expectations we have around food disappoint us because the outcome doesn't quite match up. So right now, I want you just to get rid of all the expectations that you've got in your head of your little one's food journey, and just be open-minded and allow yourself to expect the unexpected. And then I promise you, you're not going to be disappointed. So why is there so much pressure around food? Well, obviously, we want our children to grow. We want to optimize their brain development, and we want them healthy. So we want clever, healthy, strapping children that are growing according to their genetics and their growth curves. We want them to be brilliant and clever. We want them healthy and happy. And that is really why we feel so much pressure around food, because we know that food is so important for all these elements to be in place. But let's look at something. What is important for growth? Sleep, a happy home environment, yes, a variety of nutrients over the week, optimal calories over the week, and all the micronutrients needed for growth. So it's not just nutrition, it's nutrition and a happy home and good sleep. And what's important for brain development? Well, again, sleep is really important when it comes to brain development. Play, interacting with your child, talking to your child, tickling your child, laughing with your child, so healthy connections with parents. Your child learning to interact with their peers, with either their siblings, their cousins, or other little children their age. And then from a nutritional point of view, protein and omega-3 we know are really important for cognitive and brain development. So once again, nutrition is critical, but it's not the only factor. What's important for immunity? Well, we know that exposure to germs, so playing in the sand, having animals, playing with animals, again, social interaction, keeping your child away from children their whole life so they don't get sick is going to be counterproductive, because at some point they're going to come into contact with another human being and they will most likely get their first cold. So it's important that by social interaction, they develop their immunity. And then going back to nutrition, we know that sufficient micronutrients like iron, vitamin C, and again, adequate protein and calorie intake and having your pre and your probiotics are really important for the immune system. So once again, it's not just nutrition, but there are also other factors that are important. So where does that leave us? Because the battle is real, but we really want to this evening prepare you for the trenches.
Yeah, look, I think we knew today wasn't going to be an easy run, so we went in with a positive attitude and put our heads down and ready for some work.
And not having your partner on the field today?
No, I mean, of course, not ideal, not having your partner in the kitchen with you, especially when your opponent's really well rested, having had a solid sleep from 2 till 6 a.m. It was definitely going to be an uphill battle.
How did you find the first passage of play?
Yeah, I mean, it was a struggle for us out there this morning. Our first few servings were absolutely battered. Opponent not having any of it. Scrambled egg, oats, toast, just not making any inroads. But luckily, that's where the experience comes to play. We thought quick and utilized the tomato sauce, which really helped claw the game back for us.
So still a lot of work to do today, eh?
Yeah, look, I think the day's not over. We've still got 2 main meals and a snack time to get through. Vegetables are going to be really crucial in the next passage of play. So I think you're going to be able to see a little bit of here comes the aeroplane, the choo-choo train, of course, going to utilize that. If need be, we'll try a little bit of the tomato sauce again, but we want to keep that for future games. And if all else fails, screen time, a little bit of cocomelon should see us through the day.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
So I think that is really puts it in perspective here. So when you are transitioning from milk to solids, we have different names for it. We call it weaning, we call it complementary feeding, but whatever you want to call it, you really need to know that it is an important part of the journey, but it is also a gradual journey. It doesn't have to, it's exactly as what I say, it's a transition. It's not a today I drink milk, tomorrow I eat solids. It's a journey. So traditionally, the kind of way that in the last, I'd say 2 decades, we've helped parents or tried to train parents how to feed their children or transition them onto solids is by saying needs to be at a set time, a set food, a set amount. And then in the past, we used to say they had to avoid all allergens. So we were very nervous about anything that had peanuts in or eggs in. And we would say to parents, wait until a year, wait until even 2 years. And so we made parents very fearful. So this whole kind of process really disempowered parents because it was so pedantic and so driven both by industry and the medical profession that parents really didn't feel that they had a say or their baby had a say. So the backlash of that, so like with anything, if you have an extreme way of doing something, you find that there will come a backlash at some point to bring that pendulum kind of into the center. And that backlash came through baby-led weaning. And it's really been good because it's challenged that paradigm of these very strict, rigid ways of introducing solids. And it's basically saying your baby is this little human being. They're quite intelligent. They're quite clever. They have a mind of their own. And we need to give them a bit of autonomy. But what I also really like about it is that we've also enabled the parents to have a little bit of autonomy and empower the parents. However, because baby-led weaning has been very much focused on baby, a lot of parents also don't feel empowered with baby-led weaning because they feel it's all about their baby. So if their baby wants, whatever the baby wants, the baby gets. Whenever the baby wants it, the baby gets it. And so they kind of don't know what is the ballpark, what are they aiming at, what is enough food, what is an adequate amount of nutrients in the day? Could the child potentially choke if the child's insisting that they eat an uncooked apple, and does the mother just have to give the child that because by definition the baby is leading the weaning, but the baby doesn't know that the apple could be a choking risk. So that is my concern. With the traditional way, we kind of disempowered both parents and baby. With baby-led weaning, we're empowering baby but not really mom as much as what we could. And then obviously the choking risk, is it, and we'll talk a bit more about choking later on, but that fear of that is obviously quite relevant. So when Meg and I wrote Weaning Sense, we kind of looked at both of these approaches and said, we see merit and value in both. And so can't we bring them together? And we created what we called Collab Weaning, which is basically the collaboration of 2 or more people working together to realize something successfully. It's basically cooperating and totally opposite to competition. Now, what we often find in weaning is that there becomes a competitive element between mom and baby, or caregiver and baby, or dad and baby, because it's like this competition. Are you going to finish your food or not? If you don't finish it, you've won. If you finish your food, I've won. And that's not what collab weaning is about. Collab weaning is both people and both parties winning and doing it together in a very kind of congruous relationship. It's a team approach. So if you look at the acronym collab, it stands for, the C stands for cues. So it's really understanding your baby's cues and realizing, you know, are they ready to start solids? When can they start solids? When is it appropriate to go onto solids? So cues, for example, like, is the baby feeling hungry? What does that look like? Has the baby had enough? And responding to those cues. So hunger and fullness cues are really important to respond to. And then what we need to do is also look that the child is their own person. And I'm going to discuss that just now in depth. We want the environment to be low pressure. Okay, that's really important. So there's never pressure when it comes to feeding. It will never turn out well if you put a lot of pressure on the process. It needs to be led by science. And I'm going to bring in some elements that are really important when it comes to that, especially when it comes to allergies and the age that you can start solid, and age appropriate. So different stages, the child will be ready for different things because it's a developmental process. And obviously this whole process has to be baby friendly, because if it's baby friendly, then it's mom friendly. So let's look at the own person. So we know that there's different sensory personalities, and sensory personalities have quite an impact when it comes to feeding. So your settled baby is that very laid back baby that really cries, settles easily into routine, and kind of can go between the breast and between the bottle, and really doesn't matter whether dad's feeding and holding or someone else is feeding and holding. And it's just really easygoing. They often just will sleep through a feed time unless you wake them up, because they are so laid back and relaxed. And they don't get easily stressed by a little gas bubble or a wind or even the feeling of hunger. So they are the easy baby. That's kind of that baby that you go, I can do this. I'm doing well. I'm a great parent and I can have 20 more. So they're not a great contraceptive baby. So the settled baby, when it comes to feeding, they will transition quite easily onto solids and generally don't have a problem. But they can be a bit lazy because they're not very demanding. And so the big challenge with the settled babies, just like I said, you sometimes when they're younger have to wake them up for their milk feeds. Similarly, you have to go, okay, let's try something new today, because they'll be happy to eat the same thing day in and day out, but they'll also be happy if you give them something new. So you can't always go with their cues that they're bored of something before you offer them something a bit more exciting. So fairly easygoing. Fairly easy to move on to solids, but you just have to remember you might have to lead the way a little bit, because they might not be so forthcoming with what they want because they're so easygoing. Then you get your very slow to warm up little baby. This is this little kid that stands at the party next to mom the whole time, holding on to her skirts. And just as she's ready to go, the child warms up and starts to go and play and start doing some of the party activities that the mom was waiting for the whole time. And now it's time to go home. These little ones might take a while to get onto breastfeeding. And if you finally get them onto the breast and they're happy and content, you've got not much chance of getting them onto the bottle. And they often are a bit challenging when it comes to mom needing to go back to work and needing to introduce the bottle, because they just really, really aren't keen to move over onto that. So it's really important for the slow to warm up baby that you kind of just give them a bit of time. It's more trusting, and they tend to be a little bit more anxious. When it comes to solid introduction, you really want to encourage them by giving them slow ways to get onto solid. So they might stay on one food for a while, and it might be while you are there eating with them, because that will make them feel a little bit more safe and they will feel a bit more encouraged to eat. And so you do have to go a bit slow with them. They might not like very spicy or a lot of flavorsome food in the beginning, because it takes them a while just to work out what solids is, never mind all these different flavors. So you have to go a bit slower with them, but they do get there. Then you have your very sensitive child, and this is the child that is really, really nervous about just the sensory environment, and sometimes it can feel totally overwhelming for them. And so it's really important that you help this child to really just to get their sensory system in a safe space. And these little ones, they sometimes feel overwhelmed by the sensation of food. So when you move them onto solids, the textures and the tastes and the flavors and how the food looks can be totally overwhelming. And so these children need to be in a good routine and a good feeding routine. They often need calmness. So they can't have a lot of external sensory input while trying to eat food, which is a lot of internal sensory input. And so you have to be very aware of this. If a child who's sensitive has reflux, they often can be quite resistant feeders. And so you might need some guidance and help with your child if you've noticed. And these tend to be our more colicky babies because they are extremely sensitive to the environment. And then we have our social butterfly. And this is the little one that just loves people and starts no problem feeding at the breast. But the minute this little one wakes up to the world, so between 6 weeks and kind of 3 months, starts waking up, starts kind of looking around. About 3 months is pulling that breast all over the room if someone comes in to see who's there, and speaks to mom with a mouthful of breast in her mouth or a mouthful of bottle teat in her mouth. And she is just so engaging, or he is just so interactive when it comes to people, and happily will smile and is known as kind of that smiley baby. And those are your kind of social butterflies. They love food and they love solids, and they get very engaged with solids and just love to eat a variety. They love flavor, love texture. They sometimes come to me as fussy eaters, not because they don't love food, but just because they get bored of food or they hate eating on their own. So if you kind of have the idea that your feeding will be your baby and your baby eating only, and you've got a social butterfly, you might need to change that expectation, because it's very likely that they will only want to eat when they're eating with company and with someone who's eating the same food as and then you share food with them, and they love that even more. So they love food sharing, and they love to eat with people, and they will eat very well if they go to like a little creche or a little play school where a meal is served there, their lunchbox, and because they just interact with each other, and they love to try new flavors and new textures, and they generally can be quite adventurous with their food. You just have to remember to make their food yummy and delicious and change it up a bit, otherwise they will get quite bored. So once we've looked at kind of the own persons, we've spoken about the cues, we've spoken about the own person, we said nothing of this should be pressurized. It's important that there is some science when it comes to feeding your baby. So there is nothing good about removing any food group from your baby's diet. So like going carb-free or fat-free is never going to be a good idea. And so don't do any fads with your baby. It's important that they get a variety of foods. Breast milk has carbs in it. It has a lot of carbs. It has fats in it, has a lot of fats. It has protein in it. It has good quality protein. It's got your omega-3s in it. So it's got your variety in it. So it's important that your child is moved over onto a good diet that has these variety of nutrients. It doesn't have refined carbs. It's got carbs that help with probiotics in the gut. So lactose feeds a probiotic. So lactose is a prebiotic, which is found in breast milk. So that makes us think, well, then the carbs I give my baby need to have a lot of prebiotics like inulin fibers. So it's your whole grains, and it's a variety of grains. So it's your quinoa and your spelt and your millet, and all those type of foods are really, really important for your baby when they are moving onto solids. And oats are a wonderful form of carbs as well. Parents are very scared about soya, and there has been a lot of good research done in both areas of is soya bad, isn't soya bad. And if soya is in formula milk, it's totally fine and safe for your baby, because their legislation makes sure that there's not an excess of what we call phytoestrogens, but excess amount of soya products that aren't legislated and aren't for your kind of age group specific of babies. there's no legislation around the amount of phytoestrogen. So don't overdo the amount of soya intake that you give your young baby. We know that that's not good, but don't be scared about soya formula at all. Delaying introduction beyond 4 to 6 months is definitely not going to be healthy for your child. So the World Health Organization says for developing countries that 6 months is when we start solid, and that's to protect the babies that don't have access to good healthy food and running waters. In developed countries like in America, in Europe, in Australia, and other parts of the world, and in developed areas in South Africa, we can safely say you can introduce your baby between 4 and 6 months of age. And we know that that is totally safe. You don't want to do it before 4 months. Your baby's not developmentally ready, the gut's not ready, but after 4 months, and definitely don't delay beyond 6 months. A sweet tooth, if you introduce your baby to fruit, for example, well, they only want to ever eat fruit and or sweet things, and that's absolutely not founded in any good science. We know that your sweet tooth is totally genetic determined. Whether you are more savory or you're a more sweet tooth person is reliant more on your genetics. If you have a sweet tooth genetic and that's where your baby's heading, obviously they're going to gravitate towards foods like that just naturally. Whether you start them on fruits or start them on veggies, they will gravitate to the more sweeter foods. And the question is, should I start my baby? When do you give your baby sugar? You don't have to give your baby sugar. You don't have to introduce your baby to junk food, to refined sugary foods, because no one needs to be taught how to eat those things. So whether it's a packet of Lay's chip for the savory tooth baby or a sweet chocolate for the sweet tooth baby, they will figure that all out on their own at the appropriate time when they're older. So you get these 2 to 3 years where you totally have control over what comes into your home and therefore what goes onto their plate and in their bowl, to basically train them on all the good foods. They say when you're teaching someone how to detect a fraud banknote in the police force, in the detective force, you don't spend hours teaching them about what a fraudulent banknote looks like. No, you teach them what a proper banknote should look like, feel like, and they learn that extensively, and then they're able to recognize any fake one anywhere, anytime. And that's what you're doing. You're teaching your baby's body and your baby what is good, wholesome, nourishing food. And then when they come into contact with foods that are more in the treat group or more refined or more salty and sugary, they will know that over time that is not best for their body, because they know what makes them feel good. Food refusal is quite normal, and it doesn't mean that you've stuffed up your cooking or you're not a good cook and you should give it up, or it really means that they just are having their say, and you just need to handle it by saying, are you full, or do you not really like that? That's okay, and don't cause a fuss. But what you must avoid is going, okay, let me make something else, let me try something else, and you kind of become a short order cook, bringing food back and forth. And don't get into that rut, because when they hit the toddler years, you're going to be screwed if that's the way that you've gone. Allergies are really important to understand. We need to introduce the allergens to our babies as early as 4 months, like peanut butter and egg. We are saying introduce that between 4 and 6 months really early. And the reason being is that we want to expose them to these allergens so that at a later stage, their body doesn't react to it. So introduce your allergens. When you're introducing an allergen, so in South Africa, it's peanut butter, it's tree nut butter, it's egg, it'll be fish, for example, cow's milk protein, and wheat and soya. And when you're introducing those foods to your baby in the early months, which basically between 4 and 6 months, you want to introduce a little bit every day for 3 days. And then if they're all fine, you can try another one. Now, don't be scared of allergies, because the first reaction is not going to be a life-threatening reaction. The first reaction is really just going to be a reaction that's going to give you a warning that your child's having a reaction to this particular allergen. So it will happen, a bad reaction will happen within the first 3 hours of introducing the food. It could be excessive vomiting, it could be breaking out in hives of the skin, it could be excessive diarrhea that starts very quickly after the food has been ingested. If your child has any of these allergy reactions, you are not going to reintroduce that allergen to your child the next day. You are going to wait until you speak to your pediatrician before you try that, but you can carry on introducing other allergens once your child has settled down after that introduction. So I hope that makes sense. So don't be scared of introducing allergens to your baby. They can't have a life-threatening reaction with the first introduction, but if they do have an immediate reaction within 0 to 3 hours of the introduction, you want to speak to your ped or healthcare provider before you reintroduce that same allergen, but you can carry on introducing the others. Be careful of too early milk removal. There's this big thing going around. I don't know where it's on Instagram. Even some of the doctors have kind of caught on to it a bit, and everyone gets so scared and they want to get rid of milk as quickly as possible. Remember that our babies' bodies are designed to digest breast milk efficiently up to 2 years of age. They still have maximum lactase enzyme to break down the lactose. It's only after 2 years that that enzyme starts to get less, and breast milk really becomes nutritionally really neither here nor there and not important anymore. So up until 2 years, that can still play an important role in your baby's diet. There will be a transition of solids becoming more important. But in that first year of life, it's really important that you go at your baby's pace. So you don't rush to remove the bottles, because then it puts a lot of pressure on food. And when there's too much pressure on food, it takes all the fun out of feeding. And that then is a big concern when it comes to your baby. Now, age-appropriate feeding. Okay, so what does age-appropriate feeding look like? So when your baby is ready to eat, so that will look like around 4 to 6 months. What you're going to feed will be fruit or seasonal vegetables, seasonal fruit and veggies, puree. You can start with puree. There's nothing wrong with giving your child puree and giving your child finger foods, because they need to learn both skills. Feeding off a spoon is not all bad, because we all need to at some point in our life learn how to use utensils. So please don't be scared of that. Now remember, feeding is developmental, and so don't rush your baby to get it to use the spoon too early, because that's not going to help your baby or you on making the fun food journey. Where you feed your baby, initially you're going to hold them in your lap to feed them, because they don't have the strength to sit in a high chair like this baby, and they need to just basically be held and supported. And you know that they're ready for solids when they can keep their neck upright, when they start showing an interest in what you're eating. And that's often a fun way to start solids, is to give them a little taste of your mushed banana between their finger, and give them a lick of your apple as you eat it, and mush the butternut between your finger and put it in your mouth. Then you know that they are getting ready to start solids. And you can spend the first week of introduction just letting them taste seasonal fruits and veggies that are safe, that you mush and put them in their mouth. And that's just a fun way to get them going before you start going to a big length of puree and everything. Then when you feel they're showing and they're engaging in food, you can puree a bit of veggie. Start with about a tablespoon at a happy, playful time of day. That's really important, because it's got to be fun. Remember, they're learning a skill and you want it to be fun. And so from 6 months, they are ready to engage more in the food in a developmental point of view. And we know that the different organizations that I've said here, and I've explained the World Health feeling around introduction of solids, but we know that between 4 and 6 months, you want to get solids going and exposure to foods, but they don't need volume. From 6 months, you're going to start making more mealtime appropriate volume of food. So it can be anything from 1 tablespoon up to even 4 to 5 tablespoons, depending on your baby and how your baby's taken to it. If your baby was prem, you're going to correct for age. So you're going to start, if your baby's, for example, 24 weeks actual age, but they are maybe 17 weeks corrected age, then you will start them at 24 weeks, which would mean 17 weeks corrected age. So you always start for corrected age when you start them on solids, because that is when they would have been born, and by then their gut would have been healthy. And so during this phase, you can start also you'll notice they're starting to take toys to mouth and things to mouth. You can start giving them a handheld piece of food. So then you're bringing in the baby-led concept, but you can still have a set time of day where you start feeding. And you, by 6 months, if you started around 4.5 months or so, you might already be on 2 to 3 meals, depending on your baby. And you're still going to be having your milk in between. You're not going to reduce milk intake at all in this stage because you don't want pressure on the solids to give the nutrients. That is really important. Then from 10 months to 100 years old is our go phase. That's where you get to eat. So think out the box. Remember that it's development and there's a continuum of feeding. So a baby is learning a new skill. Feeding is a new skill, and they need time to learn the skill. And that's why it's really important that you realize there's a social element to feeding, which must come in at 10 months. Don't eat away from your child. Eat with your child so that they observe how you eat. And a child takes up to the age of 5 to learn all the skills of feeding development, and that's why it's so important. And remember that different children are ready at different times, both psychologically and physiologically, when it comes to feeding. So don't rush your child. They will do it at their own pace and in their own time. And if they're not ready, it's going to be very stressful for you and for them. So for one child, they might already be eating broccoli florets and pieces of chicken and chunks of veggies and that, and another child might still just love their purees and occasionally will hold a stick of biltong and chew on that. That's okay. Go at their own pace. That is really important. It's not a competition with you and Instagram out there. The child that's 6 months eating all the broccoli and feeding herself with a spoon is unlikely that that's real life. So don't be taken in by that. And if it's truth, well, that's fine for that baby. Maybe your child will read a book before that child reads a book. Maybe your child will start running or walking before that child starts running or walking. So every child will develop at their own pace, just like when it comes to smiling, sitting, crawling, walking. It's the same with feeding. So that's why milk is so important in the first year of life for nutrition, so that we can allow the feeding to progress at each child's pace. Let's just end by looking at choking and gagging, because this often makes parents very nervous when it comes to feeding. Now, choking and gagging are two totally different things. Gagging is a mechanism of protection. It's basically going, and it's like that, but the child makes a lot of noise. And it's very loud, a lot of noise. The child goes more red in their face, whereas choking, there's no noise. The child goes limp, the child goes pale, the lips go blue, and that is choking, because basically choking is when the airway is cut off. Gagging is when it's irritated, that little epiglottis at the back of the throat, and the child wants to get rid of it. Gagging prevents choking. So don't overreact to gagging. You kind of just be present, be mindful, and just engage with the child, but don't make this big, what's happening? Because then the child's more likely to do gagging again and again, because your child loves the way you reacted, and it becomes a game. And that's very stressful then for you, because they want to gag all the time. So some children are gaggers and others hardly gag. Choking is very isolated and tends to be very related to a child that wasn't observed when feeding, or something was too big and it didn't dissolve. So it's important when you start the finger foods that it's mushy and bite and dissolvable and age appropriate for the child, as opposed to hard and something, if they can't navigate, if they're not developmentally able to chew and navigate the food in their mouth, and it's a hard food, then they are at risk of choking on that. So if the food is hard and is the size of like your pinky nail, it could cause a choking incident. So you want to be able to just choose right choices so that they learn to chew. I love baby biltong. You can get it from J&M. You can get it at biltong shops. It's normally got less salt. It's normally big and thick, and they can't choke. And on that, they might gag if they stick it too far down their mouth. But it's very difficult. They cannot bite pieces off. They just chew, it goes gooey, and you throw it away because it's a bit gross. And the same with dried mango. But what it does do, it teaches them chewing skills without them actually choking. And just like biscuits that are bite and dissolvable, so like your little Kittylicious range is wonderful because they are soft and they just melt in the mouth, and the baby can't choke on them, but they learn what it is to navigate first a solid texture going into the mouth and then very quickly becoming mushy, so they just swallow saliva. And that is why finger feeding is so protective, because it teaches them how to chew. And when you learn how to chew, it's like learning how to swim or protect you from drowning. So learning how to chew protects you from choking. But it's really important you must stay engaged with your baby. And if you're both concentrating on the feeding, you and your baby, the likelihood of choking, even with big pieces of food, is very, very unlikely. And that's why it's so important. So some takeaways. Feeding is fun. Let's keep the fun in feeding. Please, moms, don't see this as a heavy. It's really, really a good, fun journey. Feeding is a skill that when a child is motivated, the skill will be developed and will lead to feeding endurance. And that's my SME: skill, motivation, endurance. Motivation comes from creating an enjoyable, engaging, and explorative environment. So the 3 E's. So if you can remember SME, which is my child has a skill they have to learn, I need to motivate them to learn that skill so that they can build feed and endurance. How do I motivate them? I make it fun, enjoyable. I make it engaging, and I make it explorative. So I allow them to explore with finger foods. I make it enjoyable by chatting and laughing and eating with them. And I engage them. I bring them into it. Later on, only hunger will assist in motivation for solids, but not always sufficient, and especially in toddler years. So it's really important that even going into toddler years, feeding remains the 3 E's: engaging, enjoyable, and explorative. Responsive feeding doesn't have to be without routine and structure. So you can use the principles of baby-led weaning, be responsive feeding, and still be the mom that needs to know, my child eats breakfast, my child eats lunch, my child eats supper. And remember that it's a journey. It's a journey, and it's developmental. And if you remember these things, you are going to find that this journey is going to be one of the most enjoyable things that you do with your child. And then the last thing is, remember, there will be feeding moments, but remember right at the beginning, I said there are other factors that build growth, help with immunity and health and overall well-being. And that is also playtime, being outside in the sun, playing in the mud, engaging with your child. It's not only about feeding and nutrition. It's a critical part, but you must do stuff with your child and your baby outside of those things. So I hope this was helpful, and it's given you something to think about and something to just take forward while you go on this journey and enjoy your journey. Thank you so much.